Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. Good morning. It's Thursday, the 2nd of October. I'm Caroline Hepker in London.
And I'm Stephen Carroll in Brussels. Coming up today, the US Supreme Court pauses Donald Trump's efforts to fire Fed Governor Lisa Cook as the government shutdown delays key data the central bank relies on.
The world's most valuable startup, OpenAI, sells shares at a record $500 billion valuation.
Plus, why the global wait for gas turbines to power AI risks a new energy crisis.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
The US Supreme Court is refusing to allow President Trump to immediately fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. The court order means Cook can remain in her position until at least January, when judges are due to hear arguments in her case. Bloomberg's international economics and policy correspondent Michael McKee says the final decision may now come after rulings in cases of other senior officials fired by Trump.
The court has suggested there may be some slack given to the Fed that isn't given to these other agencies. It may be that they want to consider the cases more or less sort of together at the same time to think about how one affects the other. That is one reason that they may have punted on this for the time being.
McKee adds the Supreme Court decision means Cook will continue to vote on interest rate decisions. After the deferral, legal analysts at Bloomberg Intelligence gave Cook a 60% chance of winning her case.
President Trump is planning to use the government shutdown to fire federal workers this week. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says layoffs will happen very soon, but she declined to give details on which positions would be targeted. That's as Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee says the lack of official data during the shutdown is already proving challenging.
The data dogs are howling because, we're not getting our usual supply of information. I will say I consider the Bureau of Labor Statistics job data to be the absolutely best data source on jobs and statistics in the entire world. If we aren't going to have those, it's problematic.
Austin Goolsbee speaking there. Meanwhile, the Trump administration also halted $18 billion in federal funding for infrastructure projects in New York City. White House Budget Director Russell Vought cited concerns over diversity and equity policies for the cuts, but the president warned earlier that he would use the shutdown to target, quote, Democrat things.
OpenAI has completed a share sale that makes it the most valuable startup in the world, surpassing Elon Musk's SpaceX. The ChatGPT maker's employees sold roughly $6.6 billion worth of shares to a group of investors at a record $500 billion valuation. The company is locked into an increasingly bitter fight for top AI engineers, and the share sale is seen as one way to offer an incentive for those who stay.
Arab and Muslim leaders are pushing Hamas to accept the 20-point peace plan for Gaza announced by President Trump this week, saying the need to end the fighting surpasses concerns about its finer details. One senior regional official told Bloomberg it's important to focus on what he called wins in the plan, including an end to the displacement of Gazans from the territory. The official sees the aim of full Israeli withdrawal from the Strip as a significant achievement and said these are the reasons the plan was swiftly endorsed by the foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the UAE and other countries. Qatar's foreign ministry said Hamas is preparing its response to the plan after President Trump earlier set a, quote, 3 to 4 day deadline for the group.
Bloomberg understands that Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz lashed out at Hungary's Viktor Orban during a meeting of EU leaders in Denmark. Merz accused the Hungarian Prime Minister of derailing discussions. The clash took place during a discussion over how the EU can better defend itself against Russian threats and support Ukraine. It's the latest sign of frustration with Orban, who has wielded his veto to hinder sanctions against Russia. Meanwhile, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said Europe is in the middle of a hybrid war waged by Moscow and the continent must arm itself.
I think it is serious. I think the war in Ukraine is very serious. When I look at Europe today, I think we are in the most difficult and dangerous situation since the end of the Second World War, not the Cold War anymore.
Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen speaking there as the country's capital hosted EU leaders yesterday. Around 40 leaders from the wider European political community will join a second summit today.
Unions in France are holding another day of anti-austerity protests. Demonstrators are aiming to maintain pressure on the Prime Minister, Sébastien Lecornu, as he pulls together a budget proposal. Bloomberg's Tiwa Adebayo has more.
Walkouts are planned in sectors including education and transport today as French protesters seek concessions on labour from the government. Unions called for the latest round of action after meeting with Prime Minister Lecornu last week, citing a lack of clarity around his budget plans. The strikes are expected to be less disruptive than the last round of protests held in September, but some flight disruption is anticipated. Lecornu is aiming to reduce the deficit to about 4.7% of economic output in 2026 and has left the door open to measures that could affect the richest, saying it's impossible to not hear the French people's demand for tax justice. In London, Tiwa Adebayo, Bloomberg Radio.
Meanwhile, the shape of the upcoming budget in the UK is starting to become clearer after Labour's party conference. The Chancellor laid the ground for raising taxes and improving welfare for children at the annual gathering. Bloomberg's James Woolcock was there.
There is a roughly £35 billion fiscal hole to fill in the autumn budget. And the Chancellor also has a shortage of political capital for major spending cuts. Judging by the public hints from ministers, higher levies on gambling companies, a potential freeze on income tax thresholds and a renewed push to curb welfare spending all seem to be on the cards. But the big decisions will start after this Friday, when the Office for Budget Responsibility delivers its first fiscal forecast to the government. In London, James Woolcock, Bloomberg Radio.
And those are our top stories this morning. In the markets, Asian equities rallying. The Hang Seng Index up by 1.8%. Lots of AI drivers, Samsung and SK Hynix doing a deal with OpenAI. We have seen record highs for benchmarks in the US. Also, the All Country World Index and large cap Eurostoxx 50 shares saw a record close yesterday for the first time since March. And stock futures are very strong now for Europe this morning, up almost 0.6% on the Eurostoxx 50 futures. US futures also in the green. Treasuries holding gains. They're shrugging off the shutdown in the US. The dollar is flat. Gold steadying, but we've seen a 5-day rally. And Goldman Sachs still very bullish on gold. Those are the markets.
In a moment, more on Lisa Cook and the data challenges at the Fed, plus why there's a shortage of turbines for natural gas power plants. But another story that I've been reading this morning, which really I think someone just got inside my brain and wrote something based on it. It's about the economics of musicals. Alison Traeger from Bloomberg Opinion has been writing about how big Broadway musicals are failing at an alarming rate. None of the 18 shows that opened last year has so far turned a profit. This is a problem the industry is facing. Rising costs. Audiences have never really come back stronger after the pandemic as well. And she says this is affecting the creativity and the ambition of new shows as well. But what I found really interesting in Alison's piece is the contrast with London's West End. She says that the producers she spoke to say the smaller theatres and the bigger local audience, more Londoners going to shows, mean that people can be more patient to wait for profit, but also can allow for more experimentation. And I think that kind of bears out when you see some of the shows, big international shows that are opening in London first, giving, I suppose, producers a chance to see if it works.
Stephen, you and I have seen a shocking number of musicals, I think it is fair to say, for reasons that I shan't explain on the radio. But London does have, I think, some of the same Broadway issues in the sense that we've seen a lot of movies turned into musicals in London. Mrs. Doubtfire and Elf and Back to the Future and Totoro, actually all of which I really did quite enjoy. Luckily, though, London does have a lot of interesting fare, lots of different theatres, as you say. So it's not just the big IPs, it's also the kind of unknown new plays. I really want to see Punch.
Yes, I've heard great things.
Yeah,
But
because it's based on news, a real life terrible news event.
Well, and if you think about Operation Mincemeat, which was a film, when you go back, I mean, that's been massively successful in London, has opened on Broadway and done very well there as well. And that's an interesting idea of something that's a very British story having huge success also on Broadway. Anyway, Alison Traeger's piece, you can read it at bloomberg.com/opinion.
Right, let's bring you more now on the Federal Reserve. Lisa Cook will be staying on as governor for now after a Supreme Court ruling yesterday. This as the Chicago Fed's Austin Goolsbee warning that the lack of data publications during the US government shutdown will make the central bank's job harder. Bloomberg opinion columnist Daniel Moss joins us now for more. Good morning, Daniel. Donald Trump has been prevented from firing Lisa Cook whilst her case makes its way through the courts, various court rulings and decisions. Should we see this as a reprieve for Fed independence?
Reprieve is a fair description. They're not out of the woods, and the Trump team will try again to undermine the Fed. It's only a couple of months ago, though in Trump world, it seems like a very long time ago, that the president toured the Fed renovation site with Jay Powell. We all remember the videos of them wearing hard hats. So they tried that one, and that didn't work. Then they turned their sights on Cook. So these guys are not giving up. It is a public institution which is not kowtowing to him, and over which he does not have direct control. This is a source of frustration. He's going to keep coming back. But yes, this is a reprieve. That's why I say it's not a solution, it's a reprieve.
Does it change the likely trajectory for the Fed's rates from here, though?
I don't believe so. They've indicated they're inclined to cut a couple more times in coming months, and there's nothing in the data to suggest that that's being blown off course. Doesn't mean there's going to be a cut. Look, we've got to go back to the start of the year. We may well end up, in terms of the federal funds rate, where we thought we would be at the start of the year. So the first dot plot published this year, I believe, or maybe it was in December, the December FOMC meeting, projected a medium reduction twice, 225 basis point cuts. Well, okay, we've just had one, probably get another before the end of the year. So we'll end up with 2 or 3, which is basically where we were starting. So I'm not sure this changes a lot in terms of the policy rate in the foreseeable future.
Which is strange when you think about it, given the turbulence and uncertainty during the course of the year. The other issue that rate setters are facing now, though, is a lack of data. The BLS is halting publications during the shutdown. How big a problem is this for the Fed?
Well, the BLS has scaled back, depending on the data series, or halted publication during a government shutdown before, including numerous times when I was working in Washington, D.C. and in charge of the economic news. We've been here before. It's not a tragedy. There will be catch-up publication afterwards. But what is interesting about this is it comes at what some people are identifying as a turning point in the economy, wherein the labour market is softening, but actual other measures of economic activity are holding up pretty well. The economy grew at an annual rate of more than 3%, the last quarterly report we had, but the labour market's also weakening. So there's something going on here. We're in a sort of a grey zone. We're grappling to figure out what's going on. The Fed does have a labour market mandate, and the labour market is softening. I don't think there's any question about it. You can debate the extent of it and the causes of it, but it does appear to be happening.
Daniel, thanks so much for joining us. Bloomberg opinion columnist Daniel Moss there. And you can read the latest that Daniel's been writing about the global central banks at bloomberg.com/opinion. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Europe coming up after this. Next, to a major challenge facing global electricity supplies as artificial intelligence increases demand. Orders for turbines to power natural gas plants are vastly outpacing supply, threatening the world's ability to keep pace. Stephen Chaptinsky leads our team covering energy in Asia. He joins us now for more. Stephen, first of all, what effect is AI having on electricity demand?
So AI's effect on electricity demand depends on which region you're talking about. Here in Asia, it is affecting it, but overall, emerging nations are growing for a number of reasons, including air conditioning, things like that. Now, when you look at the United States or Europe, it is having a much bigger impact. For developed nations, where power demand had largely been flat or growing somewhat steadily, the introduction of AI, especially in the United States, has led to a real big growth in data centers, and those data centers need power. And more often than not, these companies are choosing, or utilities as well, are choosing to build gas-fired power plants, and those power plants need turbines. The turbines are the heart of the power plant. It spins and it creates electricity. And there are only 3 companies that make these turbines. So it's creating a supply crunch because of suddenly a spike in power demand in the U.S. and in other developed places.
Yeah, absolutely. The UK talking about this, the clash maybe with its climate goals, but also the need to build more infrastructure. It comes amid a broader shift also away from coal into natural gas. How big is the shortfall when it comes to the supply of turbines that are needed for gas plants?
So that's really interesting, and that was what we set off to analyze this story. We heard that there was a crunch in turbines, but when you actually look at the numbers, it's much worse over the next 4 or 5 years than we had expected. So right now, globally, to build turbines, essentially all the ones that are used for power generation, all of the manufacturers have 60 gigawatts of capacity. They can build 60 gigawatts worth of turbines every year. This year, orders are going to be above 60 gigawatts, and they're going to hit close to 90 to 100 gigawatts every year, basically through 2029, and then maybe start to taper off. So there isn't enough capacity to build these turbines for at least the end of the decade, and that means that there are $400 billion worth of power plants that are either planned or proposed that might need to be canceled or delayed if they don't get these pieces of equipment.
What does that mean in effect then for the power supplies that we rely on globally? And I suppose, is it a problem that can be addressed?
So it depends, again, where you're looking. In the United States or countries that have more money, companies that are richer, if there isn't a gas turbine, they can quickly switch to other solutions, which are renewables with batteries. That's a solution that they can rapidly roll out. The grid has the ability, to a degree, to take that in. Now, where I sit in Southeast Asia, it's much more challenging. Places like Vietnam that plans at least 22 gas-fired power plants through 2030, they don't have the option to switch to renewables as quickly. So that means that they might have to rely on coal if they don't get these turbines. We did a survey of these 22 power plants planned for Vietnam, and only one of them has a binding contract for a gas-fired turbine, which means that many of these could be delayed or not happen. In Vietnam, it's more than just AI. Their economy is growing rapidly. There are factories being built. The country, the people are getting richer, and they want air conditioning. All of this power demand requires more generation, and if they can't fill it with gas or renewables, they're going to do it with coal.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.